Hey, Jasmine.
So this is February 20th, 6:34 p.m. class 5, I think it is 5, something like that. Welcome to class 5, and this will be the best class we've done yet. And it'll be the best class you take all week. So we're excited to see you here. And you guys all look like you've lost weight to me. You're looking really super good. And so you're thin, your fitness, COVID hasn't, made you broader, so to speak. And so anyway, we're glad to see you. And so Veronica's going to double check your attendance. And do you have any questions, Veronica?
No, I got everyone.
Okay, and let me start off by saying you haven't got to talk much, and tonight will be no different because it's super long. So I'm just warning you ahead of time. And some of it I may skip through kind of quickly, but you'll get the PDF. And so you can kind of take a look at some of it. It's a little bit of a difficult discussion on pieces of it. Does anybody have any questions so far? Melissa?
Yeah, I do. I just want to make sure I got all the assignments right. So it's the 990 analysis form,
Right,
the organization review,
right,
Right.
the Poverty Inc. questionnaire.
right. And then there's one more. It's the grant request form. And they're all
Grant.
on Giving University /student, I think it is.
Okay, I'm on there right now, but I don't see anything about grant request.
Let me take a quick look here. Good question, though. Oops, it's not Giving Tuesday. If you go to student page,
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
let me go find my share thing and all that good stuff. Share screen. Wow. And here it is. So if you go to the student page, can you see that?
Yeah, I'm on it right now.
So 990 analysis.
Yep.
Organizational review form. That's what it is.
Okay, but that so that's the same thing as a grant?
Yeah,
Okay, I just want to make sure that they're
Yeah.
the same thing.
that's a grant form.
Okay.
And then you get the 990 off the GuideStar page.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
So it's just 3 things then?
There's 2 chats. Look at it. I'm all over chat tonight. Did anybody take a look at Kiva a little more after last week? After I
did.
I revved it up and said how good it was. Well, there you go. You get extra points.
Can I just speak to that real quick?
Sure.
So it was really fun. It was really difficult to choose, but I knew going in, I narrowed it down to which country and what kind of category and who I wanted to donate to. And I knew we'd pick 3 people. It was still hard reading all the stories and I set my budget at $150. So
Sweet.
it was still hard. I mean, I know that's small, but it was the start.
Right.
And, but I really wanted to pick a man with a family in Kenya that needed seed money. And so there was only 656 of those.
Wow. Well, we're
It
getting
was
it.
cool though. It was very cool.
We're fixing the world one country at a time. So we're down to 600. Yeah, that's really cool. And there's a Giving University group on there.
Oh,
If you can, go on there and join the group. And I'm not sure exactly how you do it, but I want to make sure there's a group on there. So that's really cool. Thanks so much, Melissa.
mhm. No, thank you. That was awesome.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
Jasmine is trying to be let into the room on another device. She's having technical difficulties, I guess, with her laptop.
Yeah, I let her in. All right. Yeah, she's trying to connect.
Yeah, okay.
So thanks for letting me know.
No worries.
How many have watched the movie Poverty Inc? Most everybody? Nia, have you gone through Poverty Inc?
Yeah, I watched Poverty.
You did?
Yeah, I watched all of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was very interesting.
What did
I
you
liked
think?
it.
What did you think was interesting?
I honestly thought everything was. It was a nothing watch, like honestly. But it was really just interesting how
Hello.
people would make their own businesses, and people from different countries would come in and make the new same product for free. And I think that was just crazy how that that just really influenced the family and really the whole country. It was just really crazy to just hear things like that were happening. Honestly, it's just kind of like them copycatting, and just them having to take the fall for all that hard work they put in. It was just, honestly, like I said, nothing new, but it was just really sad to see that, those realities are still happening.
I think it makes you. It makes it makes you understand it's a little more complicated than sometimes we think it is. Because sometimes people do have good motivations, but they don't realize the effect they're having on a culture. And as
Right.
Americans, we're sometimes a little bit arrogant because we think we know everything. And so it's just kind of
Right.
checking that attitude a little bit and realizing what's going on in the culture.
Definitely.
Well, anyway, I think we're going to do one of the couple presentations. Veronica, are you up for kind of taking that for us?
So we're gonna start with, we'll start with Sherry. So she wants to go over her nonprofit. Sherry, you wanna pull up your information, or do you want me to pull it up on my side, or how do you wanna do it?
When you say pull up, you mean the actual website itself?
Well, just in case, I mean, do you wanna, I could just go over the questions that you kind of just overview.
Okay,
I think that'll give everyone kind of an idea.
okay.
Can you share it? Do you have the documents, Veronica?
Well, I do, but I kind of wanted her to share a little bit, but I can pull it,
Okay. I'd say pull up,
the organization review.
maybe pull up the score sheet, maybe.
Okay.
Oh, I think I have to make you like the co-leader or something. There you go.
Okay. Let me just do,
Sure, you can go ahead and start, and then, oh, there we go. Veronica's
can you
got
guys,
it.
okay. All right, I have it up. So Sheriff, you want to go ahead and,
Okay. Basically after doing research, I found a organization that I was really passionate about. It's called TACT, Kids, Inc. And the acronym stands for Teaching Autism Community Trades. The reason why I picked this organization was for many reasons. One of them was that I was really impacted by the fact that the founder established this organization in 2016, and he was inspired by both the strengths and the challenges that he found in his child, who also had albinism. I'm sorry, autism. I'm probably thinking of my daughter because she's albino. Sorry. They felt like they were blessed with a beautiful son, but after the age 3, he started noticing that he was behind in his speech. So this kind of inspired him. After he took his son through occupational therapy to work on his sensory developments. Fast forward to 2015, his son was very creative and an innovative thinker. However, there were still some continued difficulties. So after years of working with doctors and teachers, he's placed his son on the autism, I guess ASD, which is the autism spectrum disorder. And that's what kind of encouraged him, to start this program to build upon his son's strengths to help him build confidence and social emotional awareness that they couldn't find anything outside of the doctor's office. So that's how they founded TACT. And personally, the reason why I chose the organization is because the concept of building encouragement, empowerment, and educating the youth to employment is very near and dear to my heart. My daughter is also autistic, and it does nothing more to me to when I saw my daughter uh, feel a sense of accomplishment, a sense of pride, and a sense of achievement when she took her first job, you know, and that was, of course, through lots of doctors, lots of therapy, lots of training, but it equipped her to be able to step into that place. A lot of times it's a broad range of conditions with autism. It stems from challenges with social skills, repetitive behavior, speech, and sometimes nonverbal communication. So, I mean, according to the disease control, 1 in 44 children in the United States today have ASD. So as a mother with a child who struggled with autism, it's the greatest joy and pride to see your child flourish and thrive in a society with conditions such as autism, and is truly crippling a person emotionally and mentally. And this program that I found, it allows children and youth to walk with their heads held high because of the accomplishments that they have achieved. And I'm all for that. And I think that's really important. Also, tech allows them to work in different trades. And the different trades they have are welding, auto mechanics, carpentry, electrician, traditional work, welding, and also a program called STEM. And that's basically auto mechanics, what it is. They work on engines, motors, and they diagnose electrical system problems. Carpentry, you know, they do blueprints, readings, safe hand and power tool usage. Electrical work, same thing. They read blueprints. They develop their skills in wiring lights, and switches and breakers. Then with welding, they train them in necessary skills for gas and metal arc, often referred to as MIG welding. And then the last one is the STEM, which is kind of like an IT program. It's a computer science program that introduces students to software, hardware, and networking. And I think a lot of these different trades are very key for people with ASD who have like repetitive behavior. They're used to doing the same things over and over again. And it's kind of helps them it doesn't trigger them, it doesn't cause them to stem because they keep doing this over and over again. It kind of builds up their confidence, gives them a sense of worth and a sense of achievement. And my daughter is like that. She does things over and over again, and it's perfection. Like I've seen her knit things and it looked like something right out of the factory. So I think a lot of these trades that they use are really key for people who have a tendency to have repetitive behaviors. I liked also the mission statement that they had for this program. And they said that they envision a world where neurodiversity is not only embraced, but inherently valued. A world where the full spectrum of autism community can contribute their talents and gifts and find personal fulfillment. So I just thought that was just empowering to me to be able to give someone who struggles with social, challenges and things of those nature, to give them that empowerment, of sense of pride and achievement. And basically what I told you is what they do. They, basically train each individual. It starts at the age of 8 and it goes up to 16. And they have different workshops based on what they're interested in, which I explained earlier. And if they're not sure, then they give them the opportunity to try these different workshops out to see which one is a good fit for them. They also have appeared in different press, like the Colorado Country Life, and also a local newspaper called Eastern Suburbs. That's another area where they try to create awareness by putting out like monthly magazines and also different articles in the newspaper. And they also were acknowledged as Colorado Parent from 2017 to 2021. What I found out about how it's impacting the community is, I'm just trying to go over my notes here, is that basically the autism community is the highest unemployment sector in the US. Currently, it's at 90%. And tax program leads to employable jobs, lasting careers that are personally fulfilling and suited to each individual's strengths. Also received, and like I said earlier, it also received the Parent Award from 2017 to 2021. I particularly was fascinated by the score on when I did my 990, because I noticed that most majority of the people that were on the roster contributed their time to it. They weren't being paid at all. And these are people who are in teaching trades, so that's heavy duty stuff, teaching people mechanics, IT training, welding, electrical. So, they're giving of their gifts and time to these youth and children to kind of inspire them and help them on their way into a world where they can thrive and be successful. And I thought that was really impressive. Another thing is I saw that during the time where where it shows about how much money they take from the government for grants, I saw that was pretty low too. So I thought that was pretty impressive. I am not involved in this organization. I just moved here within like the last 2 years. So I'm still kind of getting familiar with Denver. But that was one of the things on my radar when I was looking for a particular foundation to contribute this money to. And I would love to volunteer or, contribute to help them out, because I just think it's so imperative, when a child has challenges like that, they know that there's somewhere they can go where someone understands and can help them to achieve and help them move through life and not struggle, in everyday things that we take for granted. When you have social challenges, it's such a difficulty. You can't even ask for change. You can't ask where the bathroom is. You can't order on a menu. It's just really, really difficult. And I've seen the struggle in my own child, and it's cripples you, to know that every aspect of your life, you're going to have to be able to be sociable. And when they don't have that piece, it's just crippling and it's hard to watch. So I just love the idea of this organization, not only helping them through this, but also building them up and making them feel like they have worth. I do have some questions for them when I do meet them, and I want to find out what stages of a person's treatment that they're in, when they take them on board. I mean, obviously, they can't take on people who have speech or nonverbal communication. That's a little more difficult. But the stages of where a person is in their social skills or their repetitive behavior, is there something that they do if they're kind of like halfway that they can help them, the rest of the way into this trade, or do they have to be a certain place, that they have to be at in order to be able to engage in this foundational program? So that's my presentation.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you were really passionate about that. I like that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I love it. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Thanks for the time.
I can definitely see your passion.
I don't know how we follow that.
We'll just have Sherry's do everybody's.
Sharon will be the speaker.
Designated speaker.
But you know what, that's, whenever we talk about sharing your passion, it's find something that, it's going to make a community. You have a story, a great story, you know what I mean? And then you can relate to these organizations. So picking something like this, that they're making a difference and they're working on training and really, giving them a skill to contribute to society. It's amazing. I love it. Okay, so Melissa, you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, you want me to pull up your organization, or do you have your site? Okay. Okay. Back to share. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Melissa.
Okay, so at the beginning of the class, when we first started thinking about what we would choose, I've always had a passion for young children, specifically babies or the elderly. So I knew it was going to be somewhere in there. But since we live in a really tiny town of 20,000 people, I figured it might be a challenge to find something in my zip code, and it was. And so the first thing I did is I just picked 3 charities that I know about and that I love and that I contribute to. And I looked them up, and one was a pregnancy resource center, one was Realities for Children, and then the Children's Miracle Network. And I was so happy to find that they're all solid. They all scored an 18. And so I didn't really want to do those guys because they're doing good. I wanted to pick kind of like an underdog that was just getting started. So I remembered from my husband taking the class, the last session, he really liked this Dementia Together charity. So I started doing my research on them, and I made a call to the Cindy Lazinski, and I kind of started to put the pieces together that my girlfriend had just gone through this with her husband. Actually, we had 2 sets of friends that at about the same time, both of their husbands came down with dementia. And the one girlfriend had a support system. I knew that. I knew she was going to these meetings or these cafe memories, which I had no idea what that meant. And then another girlfriend that was just doing it on her own. And I saw that at the end of the process, the one girlfriend fared much better because she had the support group. So anyway, I started researching it. And it was started in 2015. Cindy's dad had dementia. And then she became so passionate about it that in 2017, she started a nonprofit. And 1,000 people have gone through the program since then. And they're relatively small. They're still getting going. So I connected with her, and she was just wonderful. She gave me a wealth of information. Their main agenda is joy. And their mission statement is, life is not over just because you can't store recent facts. And I had to process that a couple times because I'm not super familiar with dementia, but life is not over because you cannot store recent facts. So when we hear about people coming down with dementia or Alzheimer's, it always feels very sad and kind of like a death sentence, I would say. I mean, you feel really sad for those people, but she said, it's not like that in their group. It's a support group to spread joy and actually enrich the patient's life and the support caregiver's life. So it's these monthly meetings, several meetings where they get together, and they're called cafe or memory cafes. And they would be a dinner or a dance or a group where you'd share your favorite memory. You'd work on an art project or a craft. And then they also have education for frontline responders. They have support group for the person who's giving the care. And so one of the meetings they just had, and I missed it by a day, but the theme was Hawaii, like hula more specifically. So one of the patients got up and did a dance with her daughter and talked about the time, all the memories she had living in Hawaii. And then they all got to go around and share memories. And it's really like something they look forward to, and you don't feel alone during the process, because it can be a super draining process from what I've seen my girlfriend go through. So even though this wasn't what I thought I would pick, I would really like to give a check to this organization because she has such a heart, and it's grown so big, and she has such a heart for people with dementia. And so in the meantime, they just happen to be looking for someone to do their fundraising. And so she was trying to recruit me. I don't know if I would do that, but I would definitely like to volunteer. My friend still volunteers there. And so just sounds like a great organization. And it scored an 18.
They did. I know. I saw it. It's well done. Love it. Love it, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Anybody have any questions?
Any questions? Yeah.
I do, Melissa. I want to ask you, what stages of dementia do they take? I mean, because I know there's some tendencies that they may become violent or, so.
Yeah, so they start with early onset dementia. And the funny thing is Cindy said a lot of the times the patients, they're not even aware. And then as the disease progresses, they do become aware, and usually they fall into depression. they want to isolate, but this group keeps you engaged. And she said the biggest thing is you can still create friendships when you're going through this. You can have lifelong friendships, and they're really hoping for a cure. They say they're very close. And so this is like a meantime thing to give people joy, so that you're not just sitting in your house isolated. You have an activity to look forward to. You have a schedule. You can make new friends. Kathy was telling me Ernie did pass away, but she still volunteers there. And she told me that she has 2 girlfriends from there that are her best friends in the whole wide world. And even though she's in her 50s, late 50s, which is relatively young to go through the process with your spouse, she's created wonderful friendships, and she has that support group. So I honestly, I don't know the levels of dementia, but they do start right off the bat in the beginning.
Melissa,
Thank you, Melissa.
Superb, Melissa. Thank you very much. Well, we're going to move through our teaching tonight. So can everybody see the wonderful looking slide up there?
Yes, sir.
So all of your faces disappear when I do this. So anyway, we have a number to move through. I'm going to move through pretty quickly. Some of it I'm going to skip sections on. Veronica is working on an emergency at a military base, so she may disappear at some point. So we're going to go to section 8, and tonight it's on a little bit of some of the stuff we've been talking about in these 2 nice presentations. Society and mental poverty, homelessness, so why should we care or not care, and making the world a better place. So here's a couple questions. Is homelessness in the United States getting better or worse?
Worse.
Worse.
And worse. The answer is better in the longer term, worse in the shorter term. So
Could you elaborate on that?
well, I think the long-term trends is on the next slide. You can kind of see it's trending down, but the last year or two, it's trending back up a little bit, but the long-term trends have been down. The blue is all homeless on this slide. So this slide is from 2018. So probably COVID has made it worse to a certain extent. But I think the trend is still in the down direction. There's still a big problem. So even though it's down, it's like water projects in the world are much better, but there's still, lots of a lot of potential needs out there. Some of the things we looked at with homelessness, and we'll start with trauma. Trauma leaves a lasting imprint on the brain. We added this section here, and some of it is a little personal, let's just put it that way. And so I'll skip over a little bit of some of it. But what we kind of started discovering in homelessness is trauma is a part of why there's some homelessness out there. And the people affected by trauma can be re-traumatized in reaction to a conversation that seems harmless to most people. And even trauma from early childhood can affect people throughout their lives. So you have those long-term memories. I'm going to share a little video on trauma. And just so you guys know, I don't always agree with everything that I see on the videos that I teach. And but we try to give you kind of a balanced presentation, but we sometimes disagree with some of the things that we're teaching, but we're just being honest about it. Usually we have, especially in this video coming up, a professional. We may not agree with every aspect, but it's covering the subject. And then at the end of class, I'll email you tonight another video on homelessness that's a little rougher on the whole subject and a little tough on the government, and you may or may not agree with it, but I just want you to know we're not trying to take sides on stuff. We're just trying to give you, the stuff. So if I can find my video here, it looks like it's right here.
The most important thing to
Can you guys hear that okay?
Yep, I can hear it.
know
Yeah.
is that there's a difference between trauma and stress. As I like to say to people, life sucks a good amount of the time. We all have jobs and situations that are really unpleasant. But the moment that situation is over, it's over. The problem with trauma is that when it's over, your body continues to relive it. My name is Bessel van der Kolk. I'm a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and author of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I got interested in trauma on my first day working at the Veterans Administration. 1978 was the year, and the Vietnam War was over by about 6 or 7 years. The very first day that I met Vietnam veterans, I was just blown away. These were guys who were my age, who were clearly smart and competent and athletic, and they clearly were just a shadow of their former self. Their bodies were clearly affected by trauma, and they had a very hard time connecting with new people after the war. Around that time, a group of us started to define what trauma is. And in the definition of PTSD, we write, these people have been exposed to an extraordinary event that is outside of normal human experience. In retrospect, that shows us how ignorant and narrow-minded we were, because it turned out that this is not an unusual experience at all. People usually think about the military when they talk about trauma, but at least 1 out of 8 kids in America witness physical violence between their parents. A larger number of kids get beaten very hard by their own caregivers. A very large number of people in general, but women in particular, have sexual experiences that were clearly unwanted and that left them confused and enraged. So, unlike what we first thought, trauma is actually extremely common. There's a lot of debate of what a trauma is to this day. But basically, trauma is something that happens to you that makes you so upset that it overwhelms you. There is nothing you can do to stave off the inevitable. You basically collapse in a state of confusion, maybe rage, because you are unable to function in the face of this particular threat. But the trauma is not the event that happens, the trauma is how you respond to it. One of the largest mitigating factors against getting traumatized is who is there for you at that particular time. When, as a kid, you get bitten by a dog, it's really very scary and very nasty. But if your parents pick you up and say, "Oh, I see that you're really in bad shape, let me help you," that dog bite doesn't become a big issue because the foundation of your safety has not been destroyed. We are profoundly interdependent people, and as long as our relationships are intact, by and large, we're pretty good with trauma. It's a subjective experience, and what may be traumatic for you may not be traumatic for me, depending on our personality and our prior experiences. The problem with trauma is that it starts off with something that happens to us, but that's not where it stops, because it changes your brain. Much of the imprint of trauma is in that very primitive survival part of your brain that I like to call the cockroach brain. There's a part of you that just picks up what's dangerous and what's safe. And when you're traumatized, that little part of your brain, which is usually very quiet, continues to just send messages. I'm in danger. I'm not safe. That event itself is over, but you continue to react to things as if you're in danger. We are talking about survival. We are talking about staying alive. And so some people go into fight flight, or on a more primitive level, people's brain shuts down and they collapse. You have these automatic responses that are not a product of your cognitive assessment, they're a product of your animal brain trying to stay alive in the face of something that that part of your brain interprets as a life threat. And the problem then becomes that you are not able to engage or to learn or to see other people's point of view or to coordinate your feelings with your thinking. Traumatized people have a tremendous problem experiencing pleasure and joy. But the core issue is our hormones and our physiological impulses that have to do with survival. Your body keeps mobilizing itself to fight. You have all kinds of immunological abnormalities, endocrine abnormalities, and that really devastates your physical health also. Oftentimes the physical problems are longer lasting than the mental problems. And the other thing that is terribly important is the impact of poverty, or the impact of racism, or the impact of unemployment. There's other societies that are much more trauma savvy than we are, where there is not an enormous amount of income inequality. Healthcare is universal, childcare is universal. A culture like that really looks at what are the antecedents for certain forms of pathology. So the big issue is a political issue. How do we rearrange our society to really know about trauma so that people who grow up under extreme adverse conditions can become full-fledged members of society? The sense of community and people being there for each other is a critical part of surviving and thriving.
Get smarter faster with new videos every week from the world's biggest thinkers.
Okay, that gives you a little background to trauma, of course. And it is a very complicated subject, and I obviously don't have all the answers, but I just wanted to give you a little feel for the next section of what we're going to discuss. And get my slides to work, so I need to share my slides. Let's go back here. So basically the gentleman on the video, I'm going to show you his book as one of the resources. So if you want to take it further, you can. And I also think that Cross Purpose, you guys do a lot of, I think, education on this particular subject. And so you guys are probably more expert than obviously I am. But anyway, we just wanted to at least touch on the subject so you knew it's in part of our thinking. A particular set of traumas have been studied for 30 years. The following slides will allow you to score yourself. It is possible that doing this exercise will actually cause trauma. So if you think it might be uncomfortable, then you might consider taking a break. So it's the ACE scoring system, and it can be a little rough. So if you're a little bit uncomfortable with some of it, it's fine. If you just mute and turn it down for a little bit. The questions, I think there's 10. These are the first 5. the ACE questionnaire in helping discover the amount of trauma people have and maybe some of the reactions. Was a family member incarcerated? Was a family member on an alcohol? Was a family member an alcoholic or drug abuser? Was a family member mentally ill or attempted suicide? Did you experience the loss of a parent either through divorce, death, or adoption, fostering? And was one of your parents physically abused by the other? So these are some pretty significant events. I became a little more, or maybe a lot more aware of all this because my daughter has two foster kids. She adopted them both, but they do a good amount of counseling for the kids because of the terrible experience they had the first couple of years of their life. Were you physically abused, as we saw in the video? Were you often humiliated or insulted by a parent, and the parent's supposed to be your protector? Were you touched in a sexual way by somebody more than 5 years older? Did you often go hungry or wear dirty clothes? And, you know, in other words, you felt some shame probably from that. Did you often feel that no one in your house thought you were important? That would be called emotional neglect. So I'll let you score yourself, you know, when you have time or you want to do it. But here's some of the ways in general the scoring has been just on a general population. At 0, there's 36%. So it's the biggest amount. So there's a lot of people that, you know, haven't had tremendously big trauma events in their lives. And so you see the numbers 36, 26, 16, 10, and 12, you know, greater than 4 different things on that, on those, I think 9 that we had there. So here's how it correlates to homelessness is if you score a 0 or 1, only 2% experience homelessness of some sort. But the higher that score goes, there's more chances for homelessness. So you can see 4 or 5, 6 or more. At 6 or more, it's about a quarter of the people end up being homeless. So here's some more statistics beyond the homelessness piece. People who score 4+ compared to the people that score 0, they're more likely to be diagnosed with a bipolar disorder, 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with chronic depression, 6 times more likely to abuse illicit drugs, 10 times more likely to attempt suicide. So I think the way this helps us in life is if we have a certain score on this thing, we realize we're not weird. We're not an outlier. We realize there's some things beyond our control. Or if we know in general, maybe we have a friend that we maybe don't know their exact score, but we know there's some things that happen. I think it makes us a lot more empathetic to that person. And one of the reasons we took a look at this subject is Power Plus is our funding organization, and we employ 500 people. And so we use this to kind of help us in managing some of our people and some of their, you know, some of the reasons for some of their behavior. So here's, if you guys remember back, I think on the poverty slide, the biggest reason people went into poverty in the United States was because they didn't graduate from high school. And so this kind of correlates with that point. People who score 4 or more are 40% more likely to drop out of high school. Twice as likely to be unemployed, 3 times more likely to regularly miss work, 4 times more likely to have serious problems performing their job. So the Power Plus, the way we kind of use this, and we're not terribly great at this, just to be honest, but if we have a feeling somebody's at the 4 level and they're missing work, it's a difficult issue because you have other people at work and jobs that depend on other people. However, if you can try to learn to be a little empathetic and maybe help people work through some of their issues, maybe you can get that regularly missing work piece down, or hopefully a person can find a job that he really likes and they want to be at work. Therefore, have 4 times more likely to have serious problems performing a job. Some of the science behind this is this is kind of technical. And so I'll probably go through it kind of quick. Cortisol and adrenaline give us our fight or flight responses. In other words, when we have a traumatic event, either we'll fight or we'll try to leave or flight. The chemicals created by our bodies become toxic to our bodies after 20 minutes. People who live under prolonged chronic stress will see changes to their brain chemistry. So some of these activities will start really affecting people's brains. The amygdala, which controls fight or flight, gets separated from the frontal cortex, which controls logic. The body takes over, and reactions don't make sense to observers because they don't involve logic. In fact, people look really illogical, and it doesn't, we just don't get it. We have no choice in the way our body decides how to respond. It's, involuntary. There's something called a double bind. A double bind occurs when the caregiver, the parent, the caregiver is also the traumatizer. And that was one thing that was happening with my foster grandkids, was the caregivers were also the abusers. And also my grandson, his brother was also a traumatizer. So he was just getting it from everywhere. The healthy cycle is child has a need, caregiver or parent meets the need, and child feels comfort. And in the video we just saw a dog bite is a traumatic event, but it can kind of be dealt with and then it goes away because the caregiver helps protect the child in dealing with that issue. When the caregiver does not meet the need, or the caregiver meets the need, but with anger, fear, or contradictory signals, the child is not comforted. So the child's not fooled by maybe appearance when they can kind of tell what's going on with the person's heart. Double bind, some more double bind. The brain experiences confusion that has lasting effects in chemistry and DNA. The child will develop a coping mechanism that lasts in some ways through adulthood. I don't know if you guys ever have dreams, but I have dreams sometimes. And you go way back sometimes on stuff. And, I've, haven't had a ton of trauma in my life, but it's amazing how some things stick with us. If I feel discomfort, I won't be comforted. Even after many healthy cycles, the brain doesn't learn. Even after, health, it's like sometimes we're so negative and we're our own worst critics that we can have 10 great experiences of positive things. And the minute something bad happens, we go right, our brain just hasn't learned to deal with it. Your body subconsciously mirrors the emotions of people you're in contact with. This is it's called mirror neurons, I'm sorry. So you mirror a lot of a person in front of you. It's why you smile when someone else smiles, when you fold your arms when somebody else does, and sometimes a lot of this is subconscious. It's why you yawn when someone else does. It's why you have a reaction when watching pain on TV or in a movie. Mirror neurons and trauma. Our brains mirror trauma long before we develop reasoning skills. And so that's, with the little ones, the little kids, that's especially damaging. Trauma can be experienced in the womb and during childbirth. And infants feel anger, anxiety, and fear from their parents. The generational impact of trauma. Parents with high scores often resolve to stop the cycle because they want it to end. Who wants this? They make sure their children don't experience these traumas. So why do many of these children have a high rate of anxiety and other issues? Thanks to mirror neurons and modified DNA, parent trauma is often passed to the children.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I'm in a human development class right now, and we're learning how teratogens, I think that's what it's called. Basically, when the mom is pregnant and she experiences some outside, I don't know, just environmental, like harmful things or feels super stressed, it can affect the baby. So I'm kind of understanding that the baby can still get womb or trauma from being in the womb. Is that
Right.
passed on from the mother, or is that something that just happens to them? Do you know anything about that?
I don't. Do any of my cross-purpose friends? I'm not sure if you guys, how deep you guys go into this, but does anybody have an answer to that? Because I don't. I'm imagining it's a trauma the mom feels.
We don't particularly study that. And so I don't have an answer for that either. I'm sorry.
That's
And
okay.
I think it's got a lot to do with the hormones and everything, just like when they take medications or drugs, that kind of stuff. The same thing when our body experiences trauma, it releases the things, your cortisol levels are affected and all those other kind of things. So naturally, the baby's gonna get exposed to those hormones and cortisol and all that other kind of stuff that goes on.
Yeah, I agree with Mark. I think a lot of that stuff is transferable. I was also reading today, it's funny that we're talking about trauma. They said that when a person experiences trauma, medically, you can actually see in their brain how trauma has affected them. It's visible.
And there's probably brain activity in certain areas also.
Yeah, I highly recommend the book from the video from the Dr. Vanderkolk that was talking earlier. The Body.
Yeah, that's a good
Keeps
book, I heard.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal
Yeah.
book.
You'll see the book in a couple slides. So the name of the book is there. There's two books that we recommend. But anyway, I'm not an expert, and your question is very good. But for sure, I'm not an expert in trauma. But I'm more aware. I would say that you kind of grow in your awareness of different things, and this is one of the things that we're always trying to grow a little bit and see if and get further, just learn more about stuff. If you knew ahead of time, trauma-informed interactions, you were interacting with someone with a highly traumatic background, you might behave a certain way. You might have more patience. You might speak more gently or quieter, possibly. You might give them more second chances. So, one of the challenges in the work environment, one of the slides said they miss a lot more work. And so, you can be aware of that, and you can be gracious as a manager, but you always have to balance it with, being fair to everybody. And you just do the best you can, because maybe if you have just a small number of people you manage, you maybe can share with some of them that you're just helping this one person grow in this one area. They do such a great job, but they just have some problems with, showing up for work for some reason. So it just makes you a little more empathetic and sensitive to what's going on in people's lives. Here's the books right here. Bessel van der Kolk was the gentleman on the video. And then there's another book here that we suggest is a good resource. And you'll get a copy of the slides. So it's page 20, just in case you're curious. There's a couple things we look at on the subject: work life versus home life. This is the green zone, which means everything's improving or getting better. There's healing at work or home, and it's safe or healing at home or work. So I think we're talking about two subjects: healing and safety. So the best chance of growth and help is if there's healing going on, and there's at both places, work and home. If work is unsafe, it becomes a matter of survival for the most part, and you kind of just stay static on the emotional piece. You have some comfort at home, but work is a little traumatic. And probably most of us have had some trauma, some of our jobs at some point.
You know what I wanted to share, Dan?
Sure.
I went through 19 years of physical, emotional, and verbal abuse, and I found that a lot of times the workplace was more of a safe haven for me. And
Right.
I hated the fact of having to go home.
Right. And I had a job on the other side. I had a job where it was a friend of mine who was the owner, but he became so abusive. I hated to go to work because he was really great. And then every once in a while I'd go off the charts. And so you always were on guard. You could never relax. But it's amazing because there are two different worlds, and you get one world that feels good and safe, and the other world is a little bit scary. Then the worst situation is you're unsafe at work and home. Start spiraling out of control emotionally, and sometimes this is where you choose to be homeless. Some of the top reasons for homelessness, short term, is emergency shelter, job loss, unsafe housing conditions. Where GU is looking at doing a disaster trip to Kentucky. About 3 months ago, Kentucky had a big tornado, and 400 families became homeless overnight. And so you have that also as one of the things that happens. Medium term is family conflict, runaways, domestic violence, recent incarceration. Long term is substance abuse and mental illness. Homelessness and substance abuse, is it possible that our brains lead us into homelessness and substance abuse due to trauma? Certainly. If so, how should this affect how we look at these problems? And how should this affect how we interact with people? And what is the best way for organizations to help these people? Stage one is just, help them right away. My daughter is a good example. She'd gotten getting into the foster world. And so sometimes when you do a good job, you get a reputation. And so she had a need with one night was 4 kids. And so she had to take them all, but it was, for 2 days. So she was able to help out, but that's the immediate needs. The stage 2 and some of the things we've talked about as far as some of the organizations we're looking at is try to meet the practical needs of job training, rehab, et cetera. Like, for instance, with cross-purpose Power Plus, the way we help a little bit is we help fund a little bit of cross-purpose, but we've also offered jobs, that cross-purpose can pass on to some other people. It has to work, of course, but that's just the way you help people the best, I think, is getting them a good job, something that fits. As long as they're being responsible, it's the best way to get people to kind of be healthy. Stage 3 is provide longer term healing for emotional and mental health issues. So maybe, there's a lot of churches really that expand their faith work in your life, and they help you in other ways, like alcoholism, 10-step programs, 12-step programs. Just they've expanded, many of them have expanded, and they try to help people in these areas here. Spiritually, of course, their interest is high in helping people, but also in these areas here. One of the things I was going to share with you guys is we have a trip coming up. This is how we get a little bit involved. We got a trip coming up in November where we're going to Red Bluff, California. And we're going to visit probably 6 or 7 nonprofit groups that kind of all work together in helping people stay out of being homeless, or if they're homeless, try to help them recover. These groups have had 10 acres donated to them where they can build a facility from scratch to figure out ways to help people, not to really house them, but to help them in some steps in getting back to getting out of hopelessness and looking forward to having a good future. So it's just a trip that we will do some work, some painting, some feeding, just mostly to learn about how all this works and learn as much as we can about homelessness. Anyway, that's one of our service trips. I thought I'd throw that in there. So there's always the question, why should we care? And the reason GU cares is our mission is to ignite generosity, leave the world a better place. And I think all of you in this class realize that what we do is very unique and very different, because we're not asking anybody for money. We're not charging for anything. In fact, it gets to the point where I'm telling people they're cheating a nonprofit out of $1,000. I'm kind of kidding, but I'm also trying to get people to think in terms of how do we help others? How do we become more generous? How do we get outside the comfort of just watching our big screens and do some other things? And so GU tries really, and we actually do model generosity to people, just trying to nudge them and encourage them to be more generous. We know we live in a world surrounded by people suffering from society and mental poverty, hurting, lost, adrift, disconnected, confused, and what can we do to help? Generosity defined as freely giving or sharing things we value for the benefit of others. And I use myself as an example. I don't know if I gave it. I used to have a Suburban, and I would freely give or share it with somebody that needed to make airport runs because it had 250,000 miles on it. So it really wasn't a big thing to share it. When I got my brand new Sequoia, I noticed my attitude really changed. So, it's a really great example of how we can be freely giving or sharing with things we don't value that much or as much. And for me to really be a generous person is to not let the condition of the car define my generosity. But anyway, that's my example and how bad I can be. Generosity is something we live out in our lives day to day, freely giving or sharing love and kindness for the benefit of others. I think it's also like people, a lot of you are on spiritual journeys. You may or may not be people of faith, but when you're a person of faith, you're always trying to grow yourself. And sometimes you really go good and sometimes you don't do so well. And so generosity a lot of times is the same way. Sometimes you're really on fire and you're just like, you're on a streak of generosity. And then sometimes you need to be reminded and kind of pulled out of the malaise that we all get into of not caring. I think the biggest thing I see out there is people just don't care. It's just all over the place. It's, it just is. It's what it is. For consideration, here's some statements from the New Testament. And now I give you a new commandment. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. Those are the words of Christ. My children, our love should not just be words and actions and talk. It must be true love, which shows itself in action. The book of James kind of is all about doing stuff. Don't just talk about it. Don't just be a preacher, be a doer. It's great to preach, but it's better to be the model. Always be humble, gentle, and patient. Show your love by being tolerant with one another. I always tell people really work on that humble part, especially when you're on a trip, because it could easily be flipped. I went to Cambodia and I visited people that lived in cardboard things and tough areas, and they were broken and they were shamed, I think, especially the men, is, because they wanted to provide for their family and their wife. And they wouldn't look you in the eye, and you just knew they were so broken, but they had no way out. It's just like, that's how it is. So always be humble. That could be me. Instead of me sitting here teaching this, I could be in Cambodia in one of those cardboard huts, but for the grace of God. So always be humble, gentle and patient. Some of the ways we got here and some of the trends is there's been some generational shifts from the 60s to the 80s. I think in the 60s or the 50s even, there was more, the childhood of kids was a lot more free. Like they'd go out the door and they'd be roaming and free and in neighborhoods, and they'd come home when it got a little bit dark. But they were just free kids. They were free to be kids. They weren't chaperoned by adults. And they would learn from life experiences, both the good and the bad. And the bad is what we tried to protect, I think, and the good is, the problem is when we protect the bad, a lot of times we're suffocating the good. From the 1990s to the present, there's rise in awareness of crime, especially directed at children. It's become very prominent. And there's a big effort to rein in children and keep them safe. There's a flight to safety in schools. Dangerous play structures have been removed, moderate recess play activities are moderated, tampered down, anti-bullying and anti-violence, zero tolerance, adoption of the religion of safety. That's a term I put in there because in so many ways, I think one of our religions in the United States is safety. We're so much like afraid of dying or afraid of everything that it's our big religion. One of my pet peeves is infant seats. I don't know if you guys have had any experience with them, but when my kids were little, we bought 2 infants or kid seats, and that was it. Now in California, you have to buy one every freaking year, and it's just ridiculous. And to me, that's just they're probably the safety seat people are buying out politicians in the first place to get them to make rules that are so silly, but it's just nonsense. It's like, you can do it with a couple seats. Of course, it's a little more safe. I understand, but my goodness, I mean, I can't even give away car seats to people that don't have them because they're expired. Anyway, it's just one of my things that makes me crazy. Here's the message: life is dangerous. Okay, it's pounded in our heads. And I think part of the problem with COVID is this has gone down that same trail. Life is dangerous, so let's lock up. Obviously it's a controversial subject, but I think that this has been part of the issue. Adults will protect you both from strangers and from other kids and from anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. And I just see that over and over. I have friends of mine that have 40-year-olds in their house that they're still taking care of. And I'm going, man, you can't do that. You just can't. Transitioning to adulthood, desire for continued overprotection from anything that makes us feel endangered. Protection from actual physical harm to even words and ideas that make us feel uncomfortable. This fosters self-righteousness, closed-mindedness, moral crusades, and even hostility. And it leads to the death of critical thinking. Now, I'm sure some of you don't agree with some of this, and I understand that. It's fine. But I think I'm just saying the general trend has been, I think, and we think, it's just overprotection. I see it everywhere. Another example is my daughter went to college, and we're taught all our lives to provide for our kids in college. But I was at a point in my life where I didn't have a job, And my kids hit college and I didn't have any money. I ended up getting some. But my daughter said, you know, and I ended up helping my daughter with about a third or a fourth. So my daughter had to work in college, but she was the only one that had to work. Like of her 15 friends, they all got it taken care of by their parents. And my daughter has always told me she appreciates the fact that she had to learn how to work. And it just made her that much better to deal with the real reality of life after college. So yeah, it was painful for me, of course. Any good parent wants to take care of that kind of stuff. But on the one hand, maybe she was a little bit lucky I didn't have money. And so anyway, I think a lot of that is what goes on. Any feedback on that last part? Everybody agrees with me? I doubt it.
I just want to know, have
Hey,
you ever
Dan.
heard of a guy named Dr. Gabor Mate?
What's that?
Have you ever heard of a guy named Dr. Gabor Mate?
No, I haven't.
No, but he just talks about like how trauma leads to addiction and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's a tough issue, trauma and addiction and all that. I mean, it's tough. I've gone to the Tenderloin district in San Francisco. We did a couple GU trips to that, and it's just overwhelmingly difficult. It just is. I walk down streets in Tenderloin district at 4 a.m. and the place is lit up. Everybody's awake and talking and carrying on. And I go, wow, really? And you have store owners that are unhappy, you have people that are unhappy. It's just chaos. But a lot of it is because of trauma. I understand that.
And they say that with trauma, when the trauma happens, that's the point where they stop growing emotionally. I mean, I've talked to people who are like in their 50s and they still act like they're 17 years old or in high school.
Yeah.
They get so animated about that time because that's the time before the trauma hit. So they just don't identify with the responsibilities of becoming older and seeing life expand and, have to move forward and do things differently, think differently.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan, I'd like to add something.
Sure.
I've been dealing with PTSD for almost 20 years now.
Sure.
And didn't realize it till about 7 years ago.
Right.
And that's a label that they've put on me. And I guess that's the best definition for what I do experience, because there's some things that happen in my past that my body reacts to that I have no control over.
Right.
And for many years, I had no idea what was causing some of the issues that I was having. I couldn't hold a job after I got out of the military. I went through 30 jobs.
Right.
Until I got help.
Right.
And going back to the beginning of it, it was triggered from something that happened in the military, but the beginning of it happened in childhood.
Yeah.
And just to give you an example of what was going on, my father, he was in a boys' home in Florida, Marianna, Florida, called the Florida Industrial School for Boys. I don't know if anybody's heard of that before, but a lot of that stuff is just now coming out in the open that happened, especially like in the 60s. And it goes back as far as the late 1800s. And they're finding a lot of, just to give you an idea how bad it was there for them boys, they're finding a lot of unmarked graves. Still to this day, they're finding unmarked graves. And they had this White House, they called it the White House. And these boys would go into the White House and they would like severely beat them with a leather strap, sometimes until death. And anyway, all of that's been proven here lately. My father was there at home for about 4 years. He brought that stuff home back when I was 10 or 11 years old. And to be honest with you, I had honestly forgotten all of that stuff. I honestly did. Maybe I just thought it was normal. You know, I think a lot of it, you know, you just, when you're 10 or 11 years old, your mind hasn't developed enough to deal with that kind of stuff.
Right.
But that predisposed me to something that happened in the military. Now, I don't like definitions of PTSD, but I can tell you from experience that my body reacts. I can have certain triggers that I have absolutely no control over. Absolutely none whatsoever.
Yeah.
And but I will tell you that through my relationship with Jesus Christ and the renewing of my mind, I've been able to deal with these things. And it wasn't, don't get me wrong, I really appreciate the help the VA has given me. But my breakthrough came with my relationship with Jesus, and how my mind is being renewed to the truth of his word. And I could say a lot on this. We don't have enough time for it, but I guess the biggest point is that, you know, a lot of us have seen movies about guys with PTSD, and they have triggers, and they have flashbacks, this, that, and other. I don't really remember certain instances per se. I really don't, but my body does, and my mind does. And I have no control over that. Sometimes I'm getting a lot more control over it, and I'm learning to deal with those things. But I just wanted to add that in there. And but you know, the PTSD stuff, if you want to use that definition, it's very real. It's very real. And most veterans, I know there's people in law enforcement, you know, and fire department personnel, they see a lot of trauma also. But yeah, that stuff's very real. And I just wanted to add that in there. I could say a lot more on it, but we don't have enough time.
Oh, super. Thank you. Well, I think a big part of it is just being aware of it. And even if you're being controlled by your own body, at least the good news is, you know, it's not something you're choosing to do on purpose. You still have to be responsible for yourself, but at least you understand, you know, some of the things going on.
Now, some people do. I've met a lot of people that use that as a crutch, you know, that say, you know, my mom and dad, they were mean to me when I was growing up, this, that, and other. And, you know, a lot of people abuse that. But make no mistake about it, there's people out there that truly have issues, and it causes homelessness. Just like you said in the slide, it causes all kinds of different issues, you know, social problems. And Sherry probably, and a couple other people, from what I'm hearing, you know, they have a lot of experience with this stuff with people, and they see it probably day in and day out. And but it is very real, and it causes problems that people don't really want to have.
Yep, exactly. Very well spoken. Thank you. And the older you get, the more you realize you don't know everything. So
that's right. Yes, sir.
You're always learning stuff. Let me finish up here so it can be pretty close to 8. The loss of critical thinking, long-standing educational theory, don't teach students what to think, teach them how to think. In other words, let them process, let them work through, you know, various viewpoints, various conclusions. Strong minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, weak minds discuss people. Very good. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. And this is disappearing in higher education. And our culture is, you know, really polarized right now. And I always tell people, you know, if you are on one side or the other, try to take a small piece of what the other side thinks about and see if you could defend that position, so you can kind of at least talk to each other. because a lot of times we're so polarized and so, judging people on 15 years ago activity. I go, where's the grace and where's the love and where's the forgiveness? Is it here anymore? And it's even people I don't like that get in trouble. I go, it's like he's a human. It's like we're all human. Anyway, what is the impact of this overprotective shift on young adults as they enter society? It makes them less prepared because they've been protected too much, so they don't ever get the bad stuff. Emotionally fragile, unable to cope with stress, constantly seeking the safe spaces. Migration to either isolation or surrounding themselves with like-minded people, which is kind of known as tribalism. Also echo chambers. 2 quotes for discussion: a culture that allows the concept of safety to creep so far that it equates emotional discomfort with physical dangers, a culture that encourages people to systematically protect one another from the very experiences embedded in daily life that they need in order to become strong and healthy. And teaching kids that failures, insults, and painful experiences will do lasting damage is harmful in and of itself. Human beings need physical and mental challenges and stresses or we deteriorate. The rise of tribalism. And I know I'm going through this stuff really fast. And so you'll have this whole thing. And my apologies, we've kind of overloaded this one section and we're still working on trying to trim it down a little bit. But anyway, a tribe is a group of people that feel connected to each other in a meaningful way because they share something in common that matters to them. And that can be a good thing. I don't want people to think that's bad. It can be bad if that's all you do. But it's like going to a church, there's the Catholic Church, the Baptist Church, the Mormon Church, or whatever. The groups that you feel connected with, that's healthy. That's healthy. But it's unhealthy if you start allowing it to just be, you're totally consumed by it. The group allows them to make distinction of us and them. Tribalism is a pattern of attitudes and behaviors we tend to adopt when we come to identify with our tribes. I'm going to show you a little video clip here. Herding people that migrate to tribes to find safe places. Depending on the tribal identity, a person can find themselves further isolated from society. It can lead to greater difficulty in integrating, and it's greatly facilitated by social media. And let me share this one clip with you real quick. And let me stop sharing here and start. Let me make sure I have the correct video. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of stress in my life when I teach, but you guys understand stress better now. So now you can give me a little love. Let me go to the share screen again and the video. Okay, I'm gonna just ask if you hear it.
Most people would.
Did you guys hear that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Rather be in the majority than be right. It's difficult to go against the herd. As human beings, we are naturally highly social creatures, and we enjoy being part of a tribe. When you're around people who share your values, your principles, or anything else in common with you, it could even be the same sports team, you feel comfortable. However, tribalism and the innate desire to conform at all costs can lead to groupthink, herd stupidity, discrimination, and when taken to an extreme, even violence. Something that struck me over the past few years is how unwilling people are to go against the majority opinion or the popular opinion on any given subject, even when the majority position is objectively wrong or simply immoral. It's important to not assume that the majority or popular position is always right, simply by nature of it being the majority opinion. I'm sure you can think of times in the past where that has certainly not been the case. Once they've made up their mind, most people would rather commit to being wrong than admit they were wrong. Now, humility is hard, but lack of humility and lack of honesty makes bad things worse. And much of what we've seen going on is sheer commitment to being wrong, people trying to save face and protect their ego. Now, instead of saying, we were wrong or we made a mistake, people say, the science changed. Now, you don't need to commit to being wrong. It's foolish to wrap your identity and ego around your own wrongness. Change your mind when you're presented with new information or a better argument. It's easier to fool a person than to convince them that they've been fooled. Now, this is a quote that's commonly attributed to Mark Twain. I don't know if he really said it or not, but due to various forms of cognitive dissonance, ego protection, sunk cost fallacy, a lot of people don't want to admit when they have been duped. Now, nobody likes being wrong, but when you are proven to be so, it's better to take the short-term pain of the ego than it is to barrel off a cliff, metaphorically or literally. If we want to avoid a hyperpolarized society, we all need to be able to be a little bit more humble and a little bit more empathetic. I think that's the way forward.
I think that's a nice little clip. And we're on the finishing piece here. You guys see in the slide again? Yeah, there we are. Social media, both the physical and electronic isolation from people we disagree with, allow the forces of confirmation bias, groupthink, echo chambers, tribalism to push us still further apart. Children who have been social media natives practically all their lives easily become enraged at each other, prone to judgmentalism and to pursue moral campaigns, and are stunted socially and cannot integrate well into adulthood. Social media and mental health. 6 ways social media affects mental health. It's addictive. It triggers more sadness, less well-being. Comparing our lives with others is mentally unhealthy. It can lead to jealousy and vicious cycle, spawning rage and hatred. More friends on social media doesn't mean you're most social. Strangers are interacting with our kids. And I'm going to show you a clip. It's also good. I mean, it's like sometimes we get a little carried away. I mean, I have a cell phone like everybody else, and I got to speak to 2 of my grandkids today, driving home from church. And, you got to talk for 5 minutes. I go, this is the great part of this stuff. So it's not always 100% bad, but there's a lot of things that if you're not careful, can really mess things up.
They said also too, Dan, that social science studies have shown that it also affects people's social skills and this decision making when they're integrated into social media so much. And I've seen it with my own kids. They'll chat them up on the text, but the minute they get on the phone, they don't know how to have conversation with other people. It's amazing.
That's exactly true. I think you have to be careful, though. You want to always say what the good things are, or the positive pieces are, and then try to work it that way. Let me show you one thing, and I'm going back to the negative side. Giving University, I'm going to show you a clip of a movie that we financed that's just breaking out. It'll be at the Santa Barbara. It's at the Santa Barbara movie. When they do the little movie things, I forget what you call it. But this is
the film festivals.
Yeah, we're going to be in the Santa Barbara Film Festival. It's kind of a big deal in about a week, maybe 2 weeks. So I'm going to share a little bit of that with you, because this is the dark side of social media for sure. Can you guys hear that?
I don't hear it. It's frozen. There's no sound.
Date's November the 12th.
Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Okay.
2013. The time now is approximately 7:28 in the morning. Investigator R.D. Vile, President is Detective Joe Phillips with Virginia Beach Police.
Do you remember that time period?
Yes.
Can you start to tell the jury what happened?
I had, a friend request from this Steve Crofton guy.
Prior to that date, had you ever had contact with a Steve Crofton?
No.
For the first time in history, we're letting strangers interact with our kids in the back of our car, in their bedrooms, in their homes.
That online environment has just created this access to children that was never there before.
Physiologically, they don't understand who is out there and what people are capable of.
It's been called a new form of sexual assault, online sextortion.
For HSI, the increase that we've seen is definitely sextortion.
Sextortion is probably the fastest growing crime in the world.
That's right, sextortion attempts are skyrocketing.
You know, we see cases come in for children as young as 8 years old, 9 years old. We're talking elementary school children.
As a predator, you can actually create an online profile that matches the preferences of that child.
He got information from our chats through my computer, information about my mom, about my sister. He had Google images of my home.
From 16 years ago to today, there is no mold. Anybody from any walk of life could be involved in this. I mean, we've had doctors and police and clergy.
Simply the fact of who the offender was very shocking in this case.
We intercepted a letter he wrote to the Chinese embassy in Washington. If they would break him out, he would give them all the information on the F-18.
When you talk to me, please don't lie to me. You're a grown man, you're an officer in the Navy.
These grown men are going after these young girls and they try to kill them. Might not be in their intention, but they're killing them. And we have to stop it.
I would literally do anything to save one. There's so many kids out there that need saving that there's just not enough of us to do it.
So yeah, we're aware of the issues with the phones and stuff, and I didn't mean to. I like to make sure we're balanced, but yeah, there's some stuff. This is breaking into the Santa Barbara Film Festival. We're gonna have two versions. One will be the version they show kids at schools. That's what our goal, and the other version is the longer version that are for parents. So anyway, the link is in the notes that you'll get as soon as I share my screen here, and we'll finish up. Quote for discussion: the primary cause of the increase in adolescent mental illness is frequent use of smartphones, and what I just showed you. It's the danger really. It's strangers in your kids' phones. Less than 2 hours a day seems to have no bad effects, no deleterious effects, but adolescents who spend several hours a day interacting with screens, particularly if they start in their early teen years or younger, have worse mental health outcomes than do adolescents who use these devices less and who spend more face-to-face time in social interaction. And that's a gentleman, I think it's a gentleman that put that out there. A couple more slides here. Helping those who are hurt in medication versus psychotherapy. Medication, psychotherapy, and their combination are effective in helping people with emotional and behavior problems. Helping those who are hurt in both psychotherapy and medication treatments are successful over time. When we were talking a little bit about trauma, PTSD, and things like that, the therapy and the medication combinations, and really the spiritual aspect of it also, I think the three pieces can help people improve. I don't know if you ever recover 100%, but you can learn how to contain it. Without a supporting environment, most people do not continue with the necessary treatments. That's very true. Or lean too heavily on medication-centric treatments, lacking critical psychotherapy. When my daughter got in big trouble, she was in the part of the hospital where they, if there's some things that are starting to break down in your mental part, they put you. And what I found was the answers, you learn a lot when that happens. And it seemed like there was two things. It was either all Jesus. The answers were all Jesus 100%. Or all drugs 100%. So I tried to spend some time finding a person that kind of had a balance on both of them. The results are societies are fulfilled with many emotional hurting and isolated souls. Large numbers of children step into adulthood unprepared for life as an adult. especially children that receive disorder moderating drugs that suppress their ability to learn and socialize accordingly later in adulthood. And I think especially with boys, they probably over medicate some of them or a lot of them. Childhood overprotectiveness, tribalism, social media, and the lack of long-term continuous mental health assistance make the situation far worse. So basically, it's kind of a lot, and it's kind of the dark side of life, I guess is the way to put it. But it's kind of the reality, and this is why this is why Giving University is here. We're just trying to do our piece and our part to kind of help make a difference. Taking action begins with each of us as we interact with the world in which we find ourselves each and every day, focused on making the world a better place in our own little worlds. In other words, change your world. You can't change the macro world very easily. Government programs cannot address these mounting challenges. Nonprofits and churches that are on the front lines in addressing social and mental poverty need our support, and where possible, our participation. So anyway, that's it. It's like Travis was saying, we could spend a couple hours on a lot of this, but I think it gives you an overview of the homelessness situation, the risk our kids are in with their phones, the trauma that people have in their lives at young ages in tough situations. And I think also it points out if you've had a blessed life, a lot of people could use a little bit of help. So any comments, final comments? We'll do more presentations next week, so make sure you get those in. Make sure you watch Poverty Inc. And we'll keep on trucking. So Andrea, you good? Andrea, Miss Carter, you're good?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
And Tonita, you're good?
Yes.
Melissa, you're good? Mr. Fernando Denver, you're good? Travis, you're good? Tahani, you're good? Sherry, you're good?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you.
Don't forget, I told you all you were losing weight and looking good, so stay on that fitness thing tomorrow.
Jasmine said she's good.
Jasmine said she's good. Lavisa, you good?
I actually have a question.
Sure.
So if we're not scoring more than, I think it's 16.
Yeah.
Is it just, can we just count that as 100% not considerable?
No, I turn it in because you get, let me tell you how you get credit for that. If you do a good job on the grant, you get credit for doing that part of the class.
Okay.
Okay, it means you did the exercise of doing a grant.
Okay.
Now, if we don't approve who you wanted it for, you have plenty of time after class is over with or whatever to find somebody else. But for doing the trips and all that other stuff, you're good because you did your work.
Okay, so I think I'm going to turn in what I have, but I think
Sure.
I was just questioning the fact of if it was going to be,
No, it's not an automatic turn down.
okay,
But what you might
because I
want-
know it didn't score in that point, but I do like the organization that I picked.
Sure.
So that was my only question.
Exactly. And just put an extra little paragraph or two, maybe explaining why they got a couple points knocked off.
Okay.
Okay. You'll be
Okay.
like a little lawyer. You're the lawyer. Okay?
All right.
But bring your game. Bring your game. Nia, you good? Zoom user, you good? Corvia, you're good? And Jasmine, you're good. Well, listen, we'll see y'all next week. Keep working hard. Keep turning in that stuff. Thank you so much. This will be the last of long me just talking classes. And we'll keep on trucking next week.
All right, thank you.